from junior high to high school, that transition from high school to life is so very important. And so I'm going to start with a thank you to you guys for what you guys do. It is so vitally important, and I'm blessed and touched that you guys are here because you care for students. And these students need you in a big, big way. Even when they act like they don't, they do. What are some major topics or issues that parents and church leaders should address? And we're going to put in there with middle or high school students. So take a couple of minutes and just talk at your table. All right. Somebody share some of the things that you guys talked about. What are some issues that your students are up against dealing with? Bullying? Good. Alcohol, drugs, smoking? Okay. Sexual temptations, pornography, identity issues? So, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, those type of issues. Yeah, absolutely. Broken families? Absolutely. Peer pressure? Yes. Social media? Good. Addictions? Disbelief, good. Yeah, for kids, especially that have come through the church, and they get to that place where it's like, I don't know if I agree with this anymore. Self-esteem, okay. Anybody not have kids dealing with these things? Isn't it refreshing to know you're not the only one dealing with those? It's funny, sometimes when you're in the moment, you're like, oh my gosh, my kids are awful. And you're thinking, how could they be so bad? But it's like, I love doing this because it's like you hear, you're not alone. Your kids aren't alone. They're all up against the same stuff. Those same temptations, those same challenges are there, and we're all dealing with that stuff. So, good. There's a whole bunch of questions. So, feel free to work through those at your pace. But I really want you to think about these questions. Take about 5 minutes and work through those questions, and then we'll come back together. All right. Where are your students at spiritually right now? All right, they're hungry. Okay. What she said was they love Jesus, but there's so many things in their lives that are bombarding them. So many distractions, and some of those aren't necessarily the bad. Let's be, school is not bad, but it takes a lot of time. They're forced to be there. Yes. Begrudgingly going. Sunday Christians. My dad was a Sunday Christian. He would go to church, and everyone thought he was the perfect dad, the perfect. But the rest of the week, there was no example in his life. He wasn't awful, he wasn't an alcoholic or anything like that, but he didn't necessarily lead us spiritually. You got the full spectrum, right? I have deep respect for youth pastors right now, because you have you've got the kid that's never been to church, doesn't know the name of Jesus Christ other than a swear word at home, all the way to that kid that's been in church since they were born. They know every Bible story ever, and you're trying to meet the needs of all of those kids. That's rough. They got a lot of questions. A lot of them will question God. Why are we going through this? Why is my family the one going through this stuff? Yeah. The last question, what challenges are you guys currently seeing in your programs? Some of the kids are excited to be there, they want to be there, they want to learn, but then the neighbor sitting right next to them could care less. Her comment was a lot of times the students want to be there, but especially if they're underage, they don't have driver's licenses, they can't get themselves there without mom and dad, and if mom and dad aren't willing to be the taxi service around, that makes it really tough. The average attending student/kid comes to church 1.7 times a month, which equals out to about 24 hours a year. If you think you're going to disciple a student into a relationship, a deep relationship with Christ in 24 hours a year, you're fooling yourself. That's not going to happen. Even those students that want it, there's all those other hours, all of those other temptations and bombardments that are nailing these kids left and right. That's just not cut it. So yeah, that's a great one. Anybody else? Anybody else something that's working? What do you do in your programs that works? What's a positive right now? So they do 3 weeks of lessons, and then they have a 4th kind of crazy night. So something fun, get the kids out of the church, have a good time. Somebody else? Yes. One of the things we talk about, we have it's belong, believe, become. Become is that piece where we're transitioning those students and actually applying it to their life. It's one thing for you to be like this at them, right? It's another for them to take that, walk out those doors, and actually do something with it. And that's one of the big things that we really want to stress, that our roles, what we hope to accomplish through our ministry, is to actually help them go make disciples. It's fine that we want to disciple them in our building, but quite honestly, you and I can't reach all of the people that they can. They've got their sphere of influence that they can influence, and we want to help them to be able to do that. Kind of just an open night where there's nothing planned lesson-wise, but the students can come and just ask questions. That's scary. Little bit. Latino. You're a little vulnerable because you might get a question and you're like, ooh. But that's good. That's good. We're giving, and they graduate from high school, and then it's like, now go and do it. But there's not a transition. There's not a here's how you're going to do this kind of thing. Awana has a very intentional focus in high school. In the journey material, they have, if they want to finish their book, technically they have to serve for 3 months somewhere. Whether or not it's in a younger group, or maybe they don't like kids. My son was not a kid kind of guy, so he worked in the tech department. So transitioning them into an idea of service versus just receiving. Awana does stand for approved workmen are not ashamed. Okay, that comes from 2 Timothy 2:15. It says, "Study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." So that's our scriptural support for what Awana stands for. So I'm going to be super vulnerable right now because I want you guys to understand this. One of the things that we really suggest when we do our trainings, we are here to support you. We are here to resource you. I'm going to show you some of the stuff that we have to help you. But it's your ministry. Okay? I would not even attempt to try and tell you how to do your ministry because I don't know your students. I don't know your parents. I don't know your demographics. I don't know any of that stuff. So please hear me. I'm not here to tell you how to do this thing. Okay. Second thing I'm going to tell you, your group is going to be the hardest group today. Okay. And here's why. The younger groups. When you get them in about 10 years, you're going to love them. All right? Because they're going to have gone through the program, and they're going to be ready for this. Okay? Right now, you're going to take this stuff to them, and your students are going to look at you and go, "You want me to do what?" Because quite honestly, this is a big commitment on their part, and most of these students aren't there. Okay, so understand as we go into this stuff, you might be looking at this going, "I'm not going to do this." All right, we know that. Okay, we understand that, and I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It's gonna be a challenge for your kids right now. Okay, so just understand that going in, that you're gonna have to go into this with a lot of grace for them. Because they haven't been there as younger kids coming through the program. All right. So be wise with that. Once again, you know your students. If I say, "Hey, you should do this," and you go, "Yes, that's not going to work," that's cool. All right. You guys do what you need to do for your students. Focusing in on Trek and Jordan. So Trek once again, is our junior high and middle school. So there's 3 years of curriculum available. So you can start either in 6th grade or 7th grade, depending upon how you have your program set up. And then Journey is a 4-year program for high school. We're going to talk a little bit about Trek. Okay, so there's 3 questions that we try and answer. Who am I? Okay, as a student, as a junior high, middle school student, who am I? Second question, why am I here? And the third question is, who's with me? They may not be asking you that directly, but in their head, that's what they're wondering. All right, what is this thing called life? They're starting to own some of their identity. All right, but yet they're not independent. They still need the support of mom and dad and that kind of thing. So it is a really interesting period. So and then with the Journey group, we have 3 focuses: disciples, advocates, and witnesses. So the disciples book, which is the one that you guys will start with, for those students that are trying to understand what it means to be a Christian, all right, disciples is going to be a great resource for that. The advocates is really a solid background, all right, to help them with some of their struggles like we talked about, some of those doubts. It's going to give them a lot of support with that. And then the witnesses book, it's taking their faith, owning it, and now how do I go about sharing that? It's one thing to come to church and be involved, whole other thing to step out and potentially actually talk to someone in school about this stuff. You saw over there, we did the demo, all right, with the games, the large groups, the small groups. That plays out a little differently in this, okay? The question, I think you asked the question, can you do silly games like that with students? I don't know. My students I can, because they know I'm a goof. And I'm just silly that way. So, and they already know that. They know I'm going to come with dumb stuff like that, and I'm just going to have fun with them. You may not be able to do that. You may have some students that are so hard, all right? Getting back to the point of being forced to be there. See, I have the benefit, most of my kids want to be there. And so they're there to have a good time. And so I can have a lot of fun with them. I have had in past years where some of them were forced, and it had to be different. Because you're not going to break through that hard shell. And at that point, you have to go to that next level, which is really engagement. It's the relationship component of that. You can't just be goofy and have fun. They need to know you and know that you know them and you care for them. So we really do change it when we get to this level. Instead of game time, we call it interaction time. It really is a time for you to engage with them, okay? And you may have to try different things, okay? You may try something goofy like we did in there. If that works for your students, fantastic, have fun with it. You may have to do something different. In our group, we do a lot of action games, so we'll go and we'll play Ultimate Frisbee. We have a thing called an Awana square. Red, blue, green, yellow. All right. If your church decides to put it, you can use this. There's a ton of games you can play with that. That becomes a diamond for games, all kinds of stuff. So here's the thing: your kids might not want to play games at all. I had a year where the kids, I tried so many times to play anything, and they were just like, we're like rolling the ball to them, not like. And it was like, you kidding me? But it was just where they were. They just didn't want to engage at that level. And so what we found though was they wanted food. And they were willing to come. We had them bring snacks. And we just hung out for the half hour. And they were okay with that. They wanted food. And my leaders were there. And so they just engaged with the kids. They just talked to them. And that was perfect. The kids got to talk with each other, not about God. We weren't talking lesson. We weren't preaching at them. It was just a time to hang out and interact with each other and really go deeper on the relationship side of things. So you need to understand that interaction game, whatever you want to call that, is really just a time. Hopefully, it's your time that's going to be the draw. Okay, it's going to be the draw that's going to pull them in that they go, yeah, that place isn't so bad. Okay? They might not say that for the teaching time. They might not even say that for the small group time. But in that interaction time when you're just being real with them, and they're just getting to know you and you're interacting with them, it's a time where your relationship is being established and going deeper with your students. So that's huge at this age. And so we want to encourage you guys. Here's the thing. Once again, I can't tell you what your kids need because they're all going to be different. So you really do have to try stuff. Figure out what it is. Figure out what you have. You may be in a really, really small church with no space to play games. So you may need to just do something different. You may have a huge grass field on the backside of your church. And so you may be able to go out there and just do some crazy stuff in the field. Whatever that looks like for you. Here's the gem, you get to try it. Alright? And you have to try it for more than once. Because the first time they may be like, oh, that's stupid. Alright? But you try it again and they're like, well, that's not so bad. Alright? And by the third time they're like, this is kind of fun. Alright? So you may have to work through that. You just figure out where your kids are at. Okay? And work through that. And once again, they just need to know you're real. Okay? They need to know you care for them. And that you're not just checking the box. And here's the thing, they'll know that. Alright? They will see right through you if you're here today because your pastor said you had to be here. Just like they're being forced to be there. If you're here today because pastor said, hey, you need to go to this, and you went, okay. Alright? If you do that going in on whatever day you're going to do this thing, they're going to know that. Alright? They're going to see right through you and know that you don't want to be there with them. And quite honestly, if I'm just brutally honest, you probably shouldn't do it. But if you do, all right, and you do care for the students, they may not instantly warm up to you. All right, it may take 6 months to break through that hard crust. Here's the thing: you will get to them. All right, you just have to keep at it. Because the thing about it is, even if it looks like they don't want to be there, they will feel your love and care for them. All right? Because everybody has a need to feel loved, even if they don't want to admit it. They do. Okay? And if you're authentic with them and you're real with them and you truly care for them, you will make an impact on that student. Even if it has nothing to do with the Bible, they're going to see Jesus in you. You're going to be Jesus to that kid for that time. And you're going to have a huge impact on them. So, all right. All the way through Awana, every club starts with this. Okay? And basically all of these things, the track check and the faith foundations, this is the gospel. Okay? One of the things you're going to learn about Awana is we are all about the gospel. I want every student that walks in your door, you may only get that student 1 week. All right? They may only grace you with their presence 1 time. All right? We want to make sure that they get the gospel, all right? So every student that's going to walk into your building is going to get one of these. These are sold in big packets, so you're going to buy these and you're going to have these on hand, so that every student that walks in, you're going to hand this to them, all right? They may not look at it right away, all right? But hopefully they may take this home. They may never come back. But I've heard story after story that their kid came, got this, and their parents started reading through it. And guess what God did? They became Christians from this. The parents did, not even kids, the parents became Christians from this little booklet. Ideally, it's a time for someone to walk them through this, especially during that small group time. That's the perfect time. If you've got a visitor, that a leader can do this. If not, it's okay. But ideally, you would walk them through this so that they hear the gospel. Okay. Any questions on this? If you have like 5 new visitors, sure, you can have a small group just for them. Ideally, I would probably have this, unless you're a really, really big church and you do have 5 visitors, you probably only have 1 or maybe 2. I like to do that one-on-one, 1-on-2 with a leader. And it's good because even a small group can be intimidating for someone brand new. So it's sometimes good to have that separately for that first time so they're not completely overwhelmed with with some of that stuff. So, but a lot of times we'll do this first and then bring them into the group with their friend afterwards, because a lot of times this doesn't take long. I'm going to use the journey material. I understand that the track material is set up exactly the same. Our materials are broken down into 32 lessons, which is perfect for a midweek program that runs with the school year. Okay, if that's what you're intending to use it for, this is great. Okay. Now, if you're going to use it for Sunday morning and you want it all year, it's even better. And here's why I say that. One of my frustrations about we use it on Sunday nights, and one of my frustrations is I have to get through this thing in 32 weeks. There are some weeks that we have such good discussions. It's like, oh, I really like to talk about this next week, but we have to move on to the next lesson because we want to get through the book. Okay? If you're going to use this all year, it really does provide an opportunity. If you find a topic that your students are just like, yes, and there's just great discussions. Your small group time is vibrant. You go, hey, next week we're going to just do that same topic. So you have three separate resources, three separate tools that are exactly the same lessons. So let me start with the student version. This is where I said earlier, this is going to be really tough for some of them, because you probably have never handed them something and say, hey, go home and work on this, all right? Most of your students, if you did that, they'd be like, what are you talking about, all right? So there's 7 days worth of stuff in each lesson, right? Now, we know they're not going to be spending 7 days in their book. Totally get that. Okay? Reality says if they do it, they're probably going to sit down for 20 minutes on one day and slam it all done. Okay? That's reality. We get that. However, it is broken down for them, so if they did want to do it that way, they could. Okay? So day one is usually a way of an introduction into the lesson. It's usually something silly. This one is gather a few friends and play a game together. It could be a board game, pick up a basketball game, even a video game. And then it says, describe your experience. Did you or your friends try to trick, foul, or manipulate the game in any way? Okay, that's day one. Okay, so now we move to day two. There's a video for them to watch. Here's the toughest one. All right, I'm just fully aware of this. We are all about scripture memory. Good luck asking a junior in high school that's never memorized a verse in their life to memorize a verse every week. Okay, now there will be some that will do it. Okay. But this is where a lot of that grace is going to come in, because if you go to that student and say, hey, guess what, you're going to memorize Romans 3:10 through 12 this next week. Yeah, you guys are sitting here going, I'm going to memorize Romans 3:10 through 12. So, and this is where I'm talking, we do this from tunnels all the way through, okay? So when you get the younger kids coming through the program, they've already done this every week. And so, once again, in about 6 years, you're going to love this, because this is going to be normal for them. Okay? Right now, this is going to be really tough for your students. They're just going to be like, what? So be very grace-filled when it comes to this stuff. Now, here's the bottom line. If you're going to ask them to do it, guess what? You guys are going to have to do it too. Okay? If you expect them to do this, you're going to have to show by example that you're going to do this. So that's tough. I get it. You're all busy. You all have lives. You all have jobs. You all have families. But quite honestly, if you want to pulling Awana out of this whole thing, memorizing scripture is just a good spiritual discipline to have in your life. And nobody, I challenge you to come to me and tell me why it's not. You won't. Because everybody in their head knows it's good. It's just really hard. And it will take work, I promise. Here's the thing. I love Joe Pickersgill. You guys don't know Joe Pickersgill. Joe Pickersgill is 78 years old. Okay? He just finished all of the Awana material 3 years ago. All right? He went back. And this is the coolest story. He works in Germany. He works with high school kids. And he was on one of his students. One of his students was like, he just kept bugging him, hey, you're not doing your verse. How come you're not doing your verse? Bugging every week. And finally, he got so frustrated. He's like, well, are you doing it? And Joe's like, And Joe had 2 books that he still hadn't finished. For years, he hadn't finished these 2 books. And the student challenging him back, he went, and so the next year, did 2 books. So, 78 years old, memorizing scripture, it can be done, all right? Down here, there's always an empty space. This is for your students to maybe use some memory aids. Sometimes it helps if you just write the first letter of every word out. Sometimes the students will write out the whole verse with a pencil, and then they'll just start erasing some of the words. So, a whole bunch of different things you can do. Some of them like to just draw, and so they might draw little icons that will help them remember stuff. So that's just for them to put that stuff to help them to be able to memorize that stuff. So that's day 2. Day 3, we actually have a Bible study in essence. So this one says read Romans 3:9-31. Okay, so what is that? 22 verses. So it's never much. It's never read the book of 2 Timothy. It's usually just a number of verses, and then it just has them. It has a little write-up for them to work through. Okay. Down here now they have core concepts, and this is fun. In this box, we want them to write their own question. Okay. So based on the scripture memory and now this Bible study that they just did, what's a question that you have? What are they asking? What are they questioning from this lesson? Really good piece to figure out where they're at. So that's day 3. Day 4 and 5. What we want them to do here is based on those questions, so there's 4 questions plus the question that they wrote, we want them to pick a couple of those questions and actually go research the answers. Okay? So that could be asking mom and dad, it could be doing a Google search, it could be asking a pastor. Whatever they want to do, we want to encourage them to actually go research the answer for their question. Based on what you've learned over the last 5 days about sin, create an action plan for yourself. How do you plan to think and act differently? It's great that you've memorized this verse. It's great that you just did this Bible study. It's great that you just did all this stuff. Who cares? What do you do with it? Because quite honestly, all you're doing is talking about it and not actually using it and changing what you're doing because of it. What's the point? Day 7 is just your notes from your reading. At the bottom, this is a signature line. So there are awards in Awana. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's not usually one of the motivators for students. Have some candy if they actually say the verse. Maybe give them a full-size candy bar. I mean, something that motivates them. That will help to encourage them along the way. The leader's guide. You only need one of these, maybe 1 or 2, depending on how large your group is. Because this is your teaching guide. This is going to walk you through your lesson. To walk you through the lesson. There's also online a PowerPoint deck. And then you have your discussion guide. Every one of your small group leaders should have one of these. Because these are going to help them as they work with the students. Once again, they're going to see the same stuff that the students have. They're going to see it. They're going to once again have the same core concepts. They see the verse, but then there's some extra help. So there's a facilitation help, how to work within the group. There's going to be some ideas of how to help your students to engage with the group, that kind of stuff. And then it has some other questions in here. It also asks an additional question that the students don't have. The biggest key at this age is getting them talking. Okay. And one of the biggest things you can do with these questions is you ask the question and then you stop talking. Right? Now it's going to feel very awkward because it's going to be that awkward silence. All right, and you got to get really good at just sitting there and just sit there, and it's going to sound like this. Right? And you have to be strong enough to outwill them. All right? Because sooner or later, one of them will break. All right? And they will start talking. All right? What you don't want to do is when you ask the question, you break first. Because if you break first, guess what? They're never going to talk. Okay? If you try and insert your answer before any of them answer, you've lost them. Okay? So the biggest thing you can do is ask the question and stop. Just stop talking and just be perfectly content to sit there for a minute. All right? And I promise, if you have a group of 3 or 4 or more, one of them's going to break because it's just awkward, right? And sooner or later, someone's going to say something, right? And usually once one of them starts talking, they go, oh, wait a second, you're saying the same thing I was going to say. Large group, this is an adult talking, okay? Small group, this is your students talking. Make sure your leaders are not reteaching the lesson during small group time, okay? That is not effective at all, right? They've already heard it in the lesson time. This is not a reteaching of the lesson again with just 4 or 5 students, okay? We really, really, really encourage you to have the students talk 80% or more of the time during the small group time, all right? You throw out a question, let them chew on it, argue with each other. Here's the thing, arguments are fantastic, okay? Within your students, if they're arguing, that is great. Let them go, all right? Because what that means is they're processing it. Okay? Ideally, in that small group time, that's a processing for them. And a lot of them need that time to process through what we've talked about with them. And if you've created a safe environment for them to have now obviously if they start yelling and that, you don't want that. But if it's a healthy conversation where they're just disagreeing with one another, don't insert yourself. Okay? What we like to do a lot of times is go, you know who's right, and you want to go in and jump in and support that person. Refrain, all right? Pull yourself back, let them work through it until they're done talking. Questions on any of this stuff. I'm not a fan of just going, here you go, because then they go, here you go, and then just kind of throw it in the back of the car. There's just, correct. So whether or not you choose to pay for the whole thing or even just a little bit, I like to pass along at least a little cost to them. We actually have a modified Bible study book. It's called Essentials, and it's about 1/3 this size. So you saw me turning multiple pages to get to the multiple days. The Essentials is 2 pages on each lesson, okay? Especially for you guys right now just starting, that actually might be the best thing for your students because the level of work on them is much smaller. Okay, the verses are still there. It's all the same stuff. It's just less work on their part. If you have students that you know are going to look at this and go, "You're out of your mind if you think I'm going to do all that work." Then buy the Essentials books. They're cheaper. They're smaller and way less engagement. The other thing with the Essentials book is you probably just keep it at the church because there's literally no work other than the verse. Which at that point you could either text the students, email, whatever, Snapchat, whatever you want to use. Hey, here's the verse for this week you guys can be working on. You may have a student that's super engaged, high level, wants to do everything, wants to please everyone, then you can get them this book. And they can actually do that at home. So, because it's exactly the same, the lesson is exactly the same, the verse is exactly the same, the discussion questions are exactly the same. There's just fewer of them in the Essentials book. You can use those instead of this big book. So, some of the churches will hold on to these. Not a huge fan of that, only because of the purpose of this is to actually send it home with them to work on at home. But you know your students. If you know they're not going to do this, don't send it home with them because it's not coming back. So be smart about that, especially the next couple of years as you're trying to implement this. One of the things we do in youth ministries is the students will be reading their Bibles. And from the point that they enter and track to the point that they leave in high school, they will have read the whole Bible. Yeah, good luck. Because once again, you've never asked them to do this, okay? So lots of grace for this. Right? But it's fantastic. They will do that. We have the junior high read New Testament, right? So it's a little bit easier for them to comprehend. High school then jumps into the Old Testament, and they'll read through the Old Testament in their 4 years of high school. So that's ideally what they would do. But once again, you know your students best. You know whether or not that's going to be a realistic thing for your students to do. We also ask them to go to a conference, some kind of Christian conference, just because we want them to learn. For your parents that are engaged with you, there is a downloadable parent guide that can be emailed to parents every week. So if you do have some parents that want to engage with you and want to spend some time talking with their students, it just is a little bit of a discussion guide so that when they're done, they're not just going, so what'd you learn? It actually is a little more directed question so that the students can actually have a discussion with the parents. That's another thing that you're going to find in Awana. We are really, really big on parental involvement. Myself nor you are supposed to be the spiritual leader to these kids. Okay, the parents are. So we want to engage with the parents at that level. I highly encourage you to connect with your parents and have those discussions because that serves two purposes. One, the parents are going to understand how much you care for their child. But two, the parents are going to be able to tell you some things about the students that the students may not be willing to share themselves when you have that relationship.